So a few years ago, I walked into a service with expectations. Big church. I'm sure a lot of people had expectations. They were probably expecting something spiritual. Admittedly, I was only there to observe the church's technology. I was not disappointed. First thing I did is identified the brand and the model of the lighting. Googled the MSRP, counted them up, calculated the budget to install them at least 3 times, and I whispered over to my wife, who was actually worshiping, $200,000. She sighed real big. She was used to this routine, but I didn't want to keep her in suspense. So I said, "That's how much they spent on just the moving heads." "Wow," she muttered, little interest. I immediately thought of what I could have done for the Lord with $200,000. Even if they took down and sold half of them, they would never miss them. They probably didn't even use them all in that service. So like many people, I exercise great interest in how organizations I'm not affiliated with are managing God's money. However, unlike most, I make my living selling and installing church technology. That particular Sunday, maybe I was genuinely concerned about stewardship, or maybe I was just upset that I didn't get a piece of that pie. It's hard to tell. The evident problem is this: technology often distracts. Big time. Any service in which I'm counting the moving heads, there are probably hundreds of other people that are just watching them. And although oblivious to why everything is so engaging, there are a lot of other people who are engaged because of them. Then there's my wife, who couldn't care less about the lights. For her, they could have saved their money. She would care less if we were in the dark and the preacher didn't even have a microphone. She's just there to meet with Jesus. So whether we're distracted or indifferent, we have to admit that much of the church technology that we see today is more about impressing than having impact. If you ask church members, you'd probably get a whole spectrum of responses ranging from cynical to fanatical. Some resent it while others can't worship without it. So maybe it's just a personality thing. I'm pretty reflective about everything. I'm not necessarily an experiential person, so I kind of live in my head a lot. It could be a spiritual problem and I just need to worship regardless of what's going on around me. Or maybe, just maybe, I'm onto something. And we really do need to stop being pushed along by the competitive momentum of church technology and scrutinize both the intention and the end result of the technology that we're deploying. First off, let's divide technology into its proper categories. There's 2 things I'm going to talk about. One is called support technology. It includes sound reinforcement, stage illumination, visuals for song lyrics and scripture reference, all that stuff. And this is where we spend most of our time in our audiovisual integration company. Traditional churches that are inevitably going to get some negative feedback from segments of the congregation, but they see the benefits overall of using technology to enhance their services. And when they use it properly, this category of technology draws attention to the content of the service, but not to itself. That being said, there are many cases in which distractions are created because the operator isn't engaged or properly trained, and by missing cues, misadjusting audio, they generate a strong negative response. Okay, now let's talk about the next category by taking a big portion of the responsibility for the service and placing it in that operator's hands. Well, actually, let's picture him much younger, well-trained, way cooler. This category is what we call production technology. And that is where we find our beloved moving heads, along with a boundless assortment of awe-inspiring gadgets, attention getters. So in our first category, misuse is what accounts for our technology taking center stage. But in this category, it's abuse, which accounts for it becoming the primary focus. Essentially, in the same way that a pastor having a very persuasive personality could abuse that gift, the person who wields equipment in this category has been entrusted with influence in the service. That influence can take center stage, and a less spiritual person at the helm would ensure so. Influence is for mature believers. And when we put control of the audiovisual department in the hands of someone who is simply capable, something wrong could begin to develop in our services. Many people live in a responsive state toward technology. New technology is introduced and the public asks, how can this change everything? But a mature, ministry-minded individual is probably going to ask, how can I use this to reinforce what we're already doing? One person puts technology at the helm. The other remains at the helm, sees technology as a tool to be wielded, not to impress, distracting from the message, but to accentuate the message and make it memorable and impactful. Simply put, there is a line between a service built by technology and a service built for technology. I've seen technology brilliantly used to build impactful services, while many services existed, I believe, only as a vehicle for impressive AV systems. And that line in between, however certain, is not vivid, and it is very easy to step over it without noticing. And all of this responsibility typically rests in the hands of what we'll call the media pastor. I use the title media pastor a lot because, frankly, he's entrusted with the same message that the pastor has. The media pastor simply preaches it using a different language. And if the message were the noun, we could say the media would be the adjective. So beyond simply being capable, this individual must be aware of the supportive nature of his role. He's got to know how to honor the pastor and desire to work as a team to make whatever the pastor has planned as successful as it can be. I believe that anyone can be educated to understand and operate church technology within a matter of months. But the maturity that the execution of the media pastor position requires could take years to develop. So for that reason, I think it's better to start with the heart and add education than to place someone who is simply skilled in a position of control and then try to pastor them into maturity. Of course, there are immediate needs, and I know how painful poorly executed media can be in a service, both for the congregation and the person operating. But there are options. Right now, there are many courses and tools geared toward and easily available to prospective church media teams. And when I was younger, I would have relished the prospect of serving in this area, and I would have felt deep gratitude toward a church willing to invest in my education so that I could serve well in the church and possibly even one day own a technology company that helps many other churches with those same needs. And in fact, that is exactly my story. What many don't consider is that much is relative. So how much should I spend on my housing expenses, for example? $400 or $4,000? Experts say 25%. So how much is that? Well, if your income is $3,200 a month, then it's $400 a month. If your income is $32,000 a month, then $4,000 a month is appropriate. So churches operate along those same principles because God himself instituted percentage-based financial planning for his church when he commanded the tithe. And we know a tithe is giving 10% of however God has increased us. Consequently, tithing is a baseline for our giving in the same way that thou shalt not kill is a baseline for how we treat other people, but this isn't about any of that. Because much is in fact relative. We should be slow to judge churches that are capable of more elaborate technology systems or for how much they even pay their staff for that matter. If you've personally experienced the difference between a small congregation ministry and the administrative demands of ministry in a much larger church, then you understand. But this isn't about that either. The intention of this is to assist you in considering what technology is appropriate for your church. So let me first say that I believe that nothing fully dedicated to God is wasted. In the Bible, we read about the elaborate materials and decorations used for the tabernacle. In this Old Testament version of God's house, we could find a lot to grumble about. In fact, it would probably be the same grumblings that took place around the table when the alabaster box was being broken and poured over Jesus' feet. Today, it might sound like half of those moving heads could have been sold and the money used to help the poor. So it doesn't put us in great company, I've got to admit. However, suppose the alabaster box had been broken and its contents poured out simply so that those who entered the house would smell it, be impressed, want to come back next Sunday. Would that be appropriate? So my conclusion is this. Whatever is poured out on Jesus is never enough. Who can say that he is not worth it? The heavy responsibility of managing church technology is being skilled at how to pour it all on the feet of Jesus. Of course, this brings us back to the heart of the media director and their team. These individuals should see Jesus in the room, take up their alabaster jars full of pristine audio, vivid visuals, and even colorful lighting, and begin to pour it out.